Right now on Channel 13, a voice for the voiceless in our community.
He was our hero. We're forever grateful that he listened to us and was willing to investigate.
Paying the ultimate price to expose corruption and hold the powerful accountable.
He wrote about wrongdoings by mobsters, gaming officials, politicians, corporations. I don't think they could hide from him.
The slain journalist who in death helped solve his own murder.
Who knew when we were doing that story that getting some B-roll video of Robert Tellis would prove so valuable in proving that he was a murderer?
The man behind the byline.
His whole life was devoted to being a reporter. He died because he was such a good reporter.
The whistleblowers who whispered to him.
When you're a confidential source, but then the only person that listened to you and was willing to be public is gone and taken, it's like the passing of a baton.
And the jurors who faced down his killer, ex-Clark County politician Robert Tellis.
We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Robert Tellis, as follows. Murder with use of a deadly weapon, guilty.
Tonight, we revisit the case and reflect on Jeff Gehrman's legacy of service to the people of Las Vegas. Thanks for joining us for this Channel 13 special. I'm Jaewon Jung. Respected reporter Jeff Gehrman was found stabbed to death outside his home in September of 2022. To this day, his killer, former Clark County politician Robert Tellis, maintains his innocence even after a conviction. He was the subject of editorial scrutiny by Gehrman and blamed the journalist for destroying his career, ruining his reputation, and threatening his marriage. And tonight, we're walking you through the local case that made national headlines. It was Labor Day weekend when Jeff Gehrman's body was discovered in the front yard of his home. Metro Police told the public on September 3rd he had been stabbed to death the day before, killed in broad daylight. On September 5th, police released these pictures of who they believed to be the suspect, and they called on the community to review surveillance cameras on the day of the crime. On September 6th, investigators released this video of the suspect. You can see the person clad in orange, a big sun hat, gray shoes, black gloves, and carrying a duffel bag. Police also released a photo of the vehicle they believe could be connected to the crime, a maroon Yukon Denali. The evidence led police to Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellis. Detectives discovered his wife was the owner of a maroon Yukon Denali identical to the suspect vehicle. And when officers served a search warrant at Tellis's house, they say they found pieces of a cut-up sun hat and gray shoes which matched those the suspect was wearing in the video. But the proverbial smoking gun, Tellis's DNA, was found under Gehrman's fingernails. Police arrested Tellis on September 7th, just 5 days after the murder. There were many twists and turns as the case approached trial. The Nevada Supreme Court entered the picture in a First Amendment debate over whether police investigators should be allowed to search a journalist's device after the journalist has died. Tellis also hired and fired several attorneys, at one point choosing to represent himself. He also tried to get the judge thrown off his case. Through it all, he's maintained his innocence. During a jailhouse interview last year, Tellis pushed his theory of what happened.
Evidence was planted, but my involvement was planted. I don't know if it was planted in my home. At what point, it got there. Whether it was before the search, whether it was, during the search, I don't know.
Tellis told us during his role as public administrator, he was trying to expose a private realty company for alleged corruption, and he accused this group, along with police, of a conspiracy designed to frame him. That conspiracy theory remained the center of his defense as the trial got underway on August 12th, nearly 2 years after Jeff Gehrman was murdered. A jury panel of 7 women and 5 men plus 2 alternates were seated. Following opening statements, witness testimony for the prosecution began with Jeff Gehrman's neighbors who discovered his body and called police.
I ran out there to my husband and he was on the phone with 911 and he was in shock.
I walked about another 6 feet or so and saw Jeff.
Clark County Medical Examiner Stephanie Yagi also took the stand. Her testimony centered on injuries to Gehrman's body. As autopsy photos were shown in court, Tellis looked disturbed, his facial expressions appearing to reveal shock and disgust. Another witness, real estate agent Zachary Schilling, testified that he worked closely with Tellis selling probate homes through the public administrator's office. When police released video of the suspect in Gearman's murder, Schilling told jurors it caught his attention.
The likeliness of the photos and of Mr. Tellis were really, really close.
Roberta Lee Kennett, a former employee of Tellis, also took the stand. It was alleged in Gearman's reporting that she was intimately involved with her boss, and under questioning by prosecutors admitted that Tellis despised Gearman.
What were his feelings about Mr. Gearman?
He did not like Mr. Gearman.
Did you ever describe it as stronger than dislike?
Like hate?
Hated him?
I would assume he hated him.
Did he ever tell you he hated him?
Yes.
Lee Kennett says she, quote, freaked out when she heard Gearman was murdered. Evidence presented revealed she texted Tellis at the time, quote, Rob, WTF, please do not be driving around your Yukon for a while. Still to come here on Channel 13, Tellis takes the stand in his own defense, telling his story through the rare choice of narrative testimony, opening the door for a fiery cross-examination.
I'm innocent. I didn't kill Mr. Gearman.
If they hated you so much, why didn't they just kill you?
That's a really good question.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. While a criminal defendant is allowed to testify, most do not. Robert Tellis was the exception, insisting from the beginning he would tell his story, the only witness capable of conveying his innocence.
Mr. Tellis, you understand you have heard all of the evidence that the state intends to present.
Tellis's defense team faced what prosecutors called an overwhelming amount of evidence against him, including items found at Tellis's home which matched the suspect description. But the biggest challenge to overcome, DNA found under the victim's fingernails. To that, the defense argued Tellis's DNA was not found anywhere else at the crime scene. Self-inflicted wounds on Tellis's body when officers took him into custody also presented another obstacle. Investigators say it was a guilty conscience that drove him to a suicide attempt. But Tellis's attorney, Robert Draskovich, called on psychologist Dr. Mark Chambers to dispute that claim.
Is an attempted suicide a reliable indicator of a guilty conscience?
Not necessarily, no.
And is that based upon research?
Yes. It's clear from the research that the stress of being accused of a crime, particularly a severe crime, as I said, can cause people to commit or attempt suicide, whether they're guilty or not.
The defense also called a Planet Fitness manager to the stand to help give Tellis an alibi. His attorneys claimed he was working out at the gym around the time of Gearman's murder.
Who checked in? Is going to be Robert R. Tellis.
And a cell data expert who told jurors Tellis's phone pinged at his home when the crime was being committed.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Tellis then took the stand, an unusual choice for a defendant with an attorney. He appeared jittery, even admitting to jurors how he was feeling.
Excuse me, I'm obviously a little nervous.
Tellis claimed he was being framed by a private realty group he was trying to expose for alleged bribery during his time in office.
The prior public administrator said, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to do anything about it. Throw him in the trash.
He also claimed the Clark County District Attorney and Metro investigators were in on it. And at one point, he broke down on the stand as photos of his home were shown after police served a search warrant. Tellis's confusing and often hard to understand testimony went on for nearly 3 hours. But then came cross-examination. Because Tellis took the stand, he was subject to questioning from the prosecution.
The visor is down, just like the killer's Yukon, correct?
Anyone could have moved it at any time.
Your visor is down in your Yukon, just like the killer's Yukon. How did Compass break into your home to plant this evidence?
Like I said before, I don't know how it got in there, but I did not put it there, sir.
How did they plant the hat?
And I don't know how I got there, but I didn't put it there.
How did they plant the shoes?
I don't know how it got under the couch, but I did not put it there.
How did they get your DNA in there? And if they hated you so much, why didn't they just kill you?
That's a really good question.
During questioning, Tellis also confirmed for the first time he did indeed have a romantic affair with former employee Roberta Lee Kennett, and that he lied to Gehrman, denying the liaison during an interview.
You know, regrettably, we did have, and I say regrettably, I think we both regret the mistake, but we had a romantic affair with each other.
Okay, so you did lie to him, correct, on that topic?
I didn't think that was the public's business.
But Tellis told jurors this would not be a motive to kill Gehrman. Following testimony from 34 witnesses, the state and the defense both presented closing arguments. Prosecutors once again underscored the overwhelming evidence in the case, reminding jurors about Tellis's maroon Yukon Denali, items found at his home, the fact that his DNA was found under the victim's fingernails, and his gait, which appeared to match the suspect's. Tellis's defense fired back with close-up images of the man driving the Denali, who appeared to have hair.
It's Mr. Tellis's DNA in this scene. It's literally on the body of Mr. Gehrman. The items from the search warrant also tell you that Mr. Tellis is the person responsible for this crime.
What's that look like on the top of the head? I'd submit to you that looks like hair. We're seeing Mr. Tellis. He gave testimony from the witness stand. Does that profile match the profile in that vehicle?
After closing arguments, jurors deliberated for about a total of 12 hours. They reached a verdict on August 28th.
We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant, Robert Tellis, as follows. Murder with use of a deadly weapon, victim 60 years of age or older, guilty.
You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom as the verdict was read. I saw several of Gehrman's family members break down as soon as they heard the word guilty. There were many questions about the length of time it took the jury to reach a verdict. Now, I'm holding the exhibit list that was given to the panel, which was over 400 pieces of evidence. Following Tellis's conviction, I spoke with the jury foreperson who gave me more insight about what went on behind closed doors.
As it unfolded up, that's when I realized how kind of crazy and high profile it was.
30-year-old Gregory Whitney had never served on a jury before the Robert Tellis trial. He was chosen as the foreperson. What was going through your mind listening to all the witness testimony?
At first, it was a lot to process.
I'm innocent.
Tellis is the former county public administrator found guilty last week of murdering Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter Jeff Gehrman 2 years ago. I had the chance to speak with Whitney about his experience serving as a juror for this case.
It wasn't really up until his narrative. That's when we started, as the jury, started noticing a lot of holes.
Do you think that if he didn't get up on the stand, there could have been a possibility of a hung jury?
I feel like it would have been a lot more likely.
Whitney tells me several jurors found concerns with Tellis's own words on the stand.
I knew I didn't do this thing.
Here's how the votes were tallied. Once in the jury deliberation room, jurors took an initial vote. There were 7 guilty, 4 unsure, and 1 not guilty. By the end of day 1, it was 8 guilty and 4 unsure. Day 2, 11 guilty, 1 not guilty. Whitney tells me part of the holdup was because of these pictures, which Tellis's attorney Robert Draskovich showed during closing arguments. And it appeared that the person inside the Yukon Denali had hair. How were you guys able to get over that dispute?
Did have that theory where, well, if you're in the vehicle, you can't be wearing the hat. You're still going to want to hide your head. Maybe it was a hood, because the way the hair just kind of peeked out at the front didn't look like a normal hairline.
With all the evidence that was presented, Whitney says his vote stayed consistent, guilty.
I just couldn't find any plausible evidence that he supported that made his theory of why he thought this was all happening real.
I asked Whitney what ultimately led to their unanimous conclusion. To my surprise, it wasn't the DNA evidence. It was the way Tellis walked. The jurors had created their own side-by-side comparison with 2 laptops. On one side, the original surveillance video of the suspect. On the other, video captured by the Review-Journal photographer who'd been working with Gehrman on his stories about Tellis. In the jurors' minds, the similarity sealed his fate. Up next, prison, but for how long? Tellis has to clear one last hurdle before he begins serving his sentence. Stay with us. After every guilty verdict comes the question of punishment, forcing the same 12 jurors back into deliberations for an answer. Hoping to influence their decision, some family members of both Jeff Gehrman and Robert Tellis took the stand, offering emotional pleas.
I accept the verdict. But if you could please give my son a chance of parole.
These past 2 years, it felt like I've been living in a chapter of a murder novel as it unfolds. One that my brother Jeff could have written.
Never going to be able to share laughter with him again, discuss sports with him, enjoy a barbecue with him, or admire his tenacious spirit. The tragic and brutal taking of his life has resulted in a loss that I don't think we'll recover.
Tellis faced 3 possible sentences: 50 years in prison, life in prison with the possibility of parole after a minimum of 20 years, and life in prison without parole. In the end, the jury landed in the middle, returning a decision of life in prison with the possibility of parole. But before Tellis could begin serving his sentence, it was up to Judge Michelle Levitt to determine enhancements to his murder charge. She ultimately added another 8 years, the maximum penalty she could impose. She invoked sentencing enhancements for use of a deadly weapon and because the victim was 60 years of age or older. Gehrman was 69 when Tellis took his life. During the enhancement sentencing, attorneys on both sides presented arguments, and once again, Jeff Gehrman's brother Jay spoke in front of the court about the continued impact of Jeff's murder on their family and how they're afraid of retribution if Tellis ever becomes a free man.
We have a lot of anxiety about the future safety of our family, if and the children of our family, if Robert Tellis were to be released after just 20 years of incarceration.
Since the former public administrator has already spent 2 years in jail, he could be eligible for parole after 26 years. If parole is denied, he still faces a maximum sentence of life in prison. During the sentencing hearing, the judge also asked Tellis if he had anything to say. I watched as he turned to face Gehrman's family, telling them directly that he's innocent. Tellis is now in custody at High Desert State Prison. We'll be right back. Before we go tonight, reflections on a case that set a precedent for news gathering and the protection of a journalist's sources here in Nevada. The First Amendment debate made its way to our state's highest court. 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears spoke with the attorney representing the Las Vegas Review-Journal about the balancing act between protecting freedom of the press and not hindering prosecution of a crime. She told us the issue is a first. Should police investigators be allowed to search a journalist's devices after the journalist has died?
People who are in a position to know come forward to the press confidentially with that information, with the promise that the reporter will not reveal who they are.
The district attorney and Metro Police argued that they believe Jeff's phone and laptop could help with the investigation into his death, but the Review-Journal's attorney said it could put confidential sources in danger. The Nevada Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of the RJ. This was a case about murder, but it was also a case about protecting the First Amendment. We now know Tellis tried to silence Jeff Gehrman, but he failed to do so. Jeff Gehrman was for the people, and his legacy will forever live on.